Can you believe the Pixel 8 Pro here is already on the fast track to being replaced? It's barely been 10 months since this thing launched, but already Google is showing off the Pixel 9 series as part of an earlier than usual refresh for its flagship smartphone. The Pixel 8 Pro is probably the Android phone I've used the most throughout the past 10 months, starting in October 2023 and accompanying me throughout travels to 6 countries during that time. It's the best Pixel Google has ever produced, leaps and bounds ahead of the competition in some key areas, and yet there are some other things that Google just can't seem to get right. So let's not waste any more time and jump into my long-term impressions of the Pixel 8 Pro. I'm Alex Dobie, this is XDA, let's jump in. Say what you like about the way the Pixel 8 Pro looks, there's no denying that this is an instantly recognizable design, and one I've actually seen in the wild a lot over the past year. That's not just because I've been phone spotting out and about in places like Japan and the US, where Google enjoys a pretty high market share these days. No, the camera bar here instantly screams Pixel, and it's turned into a really iconic piece of branding that references the Pixel's strength as a top-notch phone camera. As you'll know if you've used any recent Pixel though, this is one area that tends to accumulate signs of wear and tear over time, and sure enough mine has not only a bunch of hairline scratches on its surface, but also some roughening around the sharp edges at the top and bottom. Not a huge deal, I kinda liken it to using an old metal packed iPod back in the day, in that wear is just part and parcel of owning this kind of Pixel. Design wise, I think this phone has aged perfectly fine. I still love the way the back of this device looks in the bay blue colorway that I have with this lovely brushed soft touch finish, and of course it looks like Google's going to continue with this matte texture on its next gen Pixels as well, which is great. It's smart, instantly recognizable and comfortable to hold, and while the front of the phone isn't particularly anything to write home about, the bezels aren't as slim as some, and if you look really closely down below you'll see the bottom bezel isn't quite uniform, I'm still a fan of this look and feel. Just as importantly, despite its 6.7-inch diagonal, it's among the easier flagship phones to hold onto one-handed. Whenever I use an S24 Ultra or my iPhone 15 Pro Max and then come back to this, I instantly appreciate the superior ergonomics of the Pixel 8 Pro. Around front, the display still looks great 10 months on. I haven't babied this phone too much or used a screen protector, and the only readily visible signs of wear are a little fading of the oleophobic layer around the very edges of the panel, and a couple of tiny hairline scratches that you really have to go looking close to even see. But yeah, otherwise this remains a fantastic display, and I actually think this is one of the underappreciated upgrades of the Pixel 8 series. This Actua display has taken the Pixel from pretty good visibility in daylight to being one of the top tier phone screens that can really withstand very bright direct sunlight. The only phone I've used that's appreciably better in this regard is Samsung's S24 Ultra with its magic reflection cancelling Gorilla Armor panel. Something that hasn't aged quite so gracefully is the Tensor G3 processor. Now this is fine for day-to-day phone tasks, even heavy multitasking with 12 gigs of RAM on board is no problem at all. But if you're a big gamer then you'll probably already know the Tensor G3 just isn't built to go toe-to-toe with the leading Snapdragon or Apple smartphone processors. In fact, the latest ray tracing 3D Mark benchmarks won't even run on the Pixel 8 Pro because of the lack of hardware ray tracing support. Unfortunately, the same would seem to apply to the upcoming Pixel 9 Pro and its Tensor G4 if the leaks are to be believed. Now, I'm not a big mobile gamer, so that's not a huge deal for me personally, but what even I can see compared to current Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 phones is that Google's Tensor chip still lags behind somewhat in power efficiency. Now, the gulf isn't anywhere near as vast as it was in prior years. Tensor G1 and G2 would get noticeably hotter, especially on 5G, and the reduced power efficiency of those chips versus comparable Qualcomm-powered devices was easy to see in everyday use. But this year the comparison isn't so stark. Instead, if you're looking at a Tensor G3 and comparing to Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, what you have is a subtle but ever-present battery life disadvantage for the Google phone. For me, that's usually not enough to be a huge deal, and all I noticed is a bit less in the tank at the end of the day when I'm using a Pixel versus an iPhone or an S24 Ultra. If I was traveling more regularly or for longer, I suppose this might be a bigger deal for me. Either way, it still puts Google towards the bottom of the pile when it comes to high-priced flagship phones and battery efficiency, and it's something I'd hope to see addressed in the coming wave of new Pixels. Whether that actually happens is another matter. Check out our video on Pixel 9 Pro leaks for more on what's going on with the Tensor G4 and how it might actually not be the chip Google originally intended it to be. The Pixel's software experience in a lot of ways has barely changed since the introduction of Android 12 in 2021. That's not necessarily a bad thing and speaks to the maturity of Android as a whole these days. And although I know some folks will definitely disagree with me, I actually quite like the look and feel of Google's Material U. It's polished and distinctive enough while still being relatively light touch as far as Android themes go. Google has layered plenty of new features over the past year in particular, and I've been using many of them through the Android 15 beta program over the past couple of months on my Pixel 8 Pro. The predictive back gesture here sounds like a tiny thing, and in some ways it is, but it also has the effect of making Android feel more responsive and its navigation seem more predictable. The new color contrast options for theme hues give a bit of extra punch to the UI's accent colors, which can sometimes skew a little bland by default, and the Pixel's AI wallpaper feature has improved slightly since launch in my view, with more hits and fewer misses being produced by Google's neural networks. And of course, it's always neat to have the baked-in intelligence that I've come to love from my time with earlier Pixel phones at my disposal, the stuff that either works by itself in the background or by scanning my Gmail and calendar to know when I'm traveling, for example to provide relevant information front and center. It's these kind of features that makes settling back into a Pixel phone so easy, even when I've been spending a couple of weeks or more in iPhone land. The photo editing AI features have become a lot less of a hallmark capability for Pixel since others like Samsung and Apple have caught up recently, plus Google itself has of course opened up the basic Magic Editor features to other phones provided you have a Google One subscription. But by far the most impressive feature in this area this time around, which is still Pixel exclusive, is the best take option for hot swapping faces in shots of people to combine various expressions into the perfect photo. And it's stuff like this which makes me excited to see what the company is going to bring in its next iteration of the Pixel software suite. You can't talk about the next-gen Pixel UI though without touching on Gemini, Google's burgeoning AI assistant. Currently, you can install Gemini on any recent Android phone within reason and have it replace the default Google Assistant, and that's exactly what I've been running on my Pixel for the past several months. But without the additional features promised at Google I/O, which likely won't be landing until Pixel 9 time at the earliest, it's still a pretty thin experience in my view. I'm paying for the advanced Gemini 1.5 and that's still lacking some pretty basic stuff like image generation. It is at least now smart enough to rope in the regular Google Assistant for basic tasks like setting timers and alarms, but I don't know, it just doesn't add a whole lot of value for me on a day-to-day basis, and to add to that, the basic non-advanced Gemini is still pretty dumb in a lot of scenarios. Bottom line, Gemini still feels like a very early-ish first-gen product, and I know I'm getting less out of it than I do with my OpenAI subscription, which costs a similar amount of money. We'll have to see if that changes with the Pixel 9 and Google's next big Gemini push. The antidote to an undercooked AI experience though is the Pixel 8 Pro's phenomenal cameras. I've spoken a lot about this camera in various comparisons over the past year, to the point where it's almost worth me just shutting up and showing you a bunch of photos and videos that I've shot with this camera over the past several months. But my YouTube spidey sense tells me that's not going to be great for attention, so let's just say the fire and forget brilliance of the Pixel camera is very much alive and well in 2024, even with rival companies coming out with ever more advanced camera hardware and larger sensors. Whether I'm shooting sunset views from a shaky takeoff, or zooming in at 5 times on a busy street with lots of movement, or even shooting portraits in challenging lighting conditions where you wouldn't expect such impressive results from a smartphone, the Pixel has earned its place once again as the phone that's in my other pocket whichever handset I'm testing the rest of the time. And with Ultra HDR photo support, shots from my Pixel pop more than ever before when viewed back on a compatible display like a MacBook Pro or an iPad. Video has been a slow burn on Pixel phones over the years, but it's also markedly improved in the current generation, to the point where I've been able to use it as a B-roll camera almost as reliably as I've used the iPhone. The Pixel's HDR Plus magic in video mode can sometimes result in a little more grain than rivals like the 15 Pro Max with its formidable ProRes RAW support, but that's something you usually only experience in much more challenging lighting conditions, and for the vast majority of stuff you're going to be shooting on a phone, or even if you want to use it in something more advanced like a YouTube video, this is a phenomenal little shooter. And actually, my biggest beef with video on the Pixel is how quickly you can fill up the 128 gigs of base storage. That's a hardware weakness, and the base model unfortunately seems likely to carry over to the Pixel 9 Pro, as Google remains quite intransigent on making 256 the standard. So overall, it's been another enjoyable year with a top-tier Pixel flagship. If you can find the Pixel 8 Pro with a decent pre-Pixel 9 Pro launch discount, then this phone is definitely still worth a punt, not least because you've still got another 6 years of Android platform updates ahead of you, the standout feature for me personally is still the incredible camera experience that you can get from a Google flagship phone. But equally, the weakness of that Tensor SoC in efficiency and gaming performance stubbornly remains, and based on the past few cycles of Pixel rumors, we might actually have to wait until 2025 before we have Google Silicon that can match the battery life of Apple or Qualcomm. So if you've been using a Pixel 8 Pro or any recent Pixel for that matter, shout out and share your thoughts and experiences down in the comments. And if not, are you tempted by the Pixel 9 Pro launching over the next few weeks? Stick around and subscribe for more Pixel goodness in the months ahead, but for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.